Hello, Think and Grow Chick family. Whether you are a Think and Grow Chick or a Think and Grow Bro, as I say now, because I'm always surprised by how many men are listening to me. So strange. I guess not. These principles are completely universal and applicable. But I just wanted to hop on, one, because it's been a minute since I've done live stream, video, podcast, etc. But two, because your girl has been in the lab working on things. And as always, when I'm in the lab working on things, I start formulating in my mind different things that I want to teach, different ideas, and I'm just like, oh, this is so good. I have to share this with everyone. So if you ever wondered where I come up with my podcast topics or live stream topics, usually it's just me doing random stuff, working on different things. Hey, everyone who's joining me on the live stream. Hey, Indira. Hey, Kimberly. Yeah, it's just me working on things and then me saying, oh my goodness, I want to share this. So you guys know that I was in New York a few weeks ago working on some really cool top secret projects, which I'll be announcing pretty soon. But I've been thinking about ways to make sure that this top secret project is super successful, not just for me, but I mean successful for people who participate in it. Because as always, the reason I do this is because I want you guys to think and grow and succeed. And so I was thinking about what are some key principles that my best clients have had, my most successful clients have had, that I can make sure that I am teaching and I am integrating into this new cool top secret project that I'll be talking about soon enough, right? And so I've been thinking about, like, what is the difference? Which really is an interesting question for myself to ask, because I have a screening process before I work with anyone one-on-one anyway. Because for one, I want to make sure that people are at a certain place in their business and everything. But also I like to make sure that people have a certain mindset. But I've been thinking about my client Hall of Fame, and as with most things, there's just some people who just really knock things out of the park and just take it to the next level. And so my coaching program is no different. I've had quite a few clients, a handful of clients who have just been like superstars. And so I'll be shouting them out in a few weeks, but I was just thinking about what was it that my like cream of the crop, top of the top superstar clients had that I really want to impart on everyone else. Just what was it? And so I was like, well, everyone that I've worked with has, for the most part, been at the same level in their business. So it's not like that, that they came to the game with more people or more followers or anything like that. It was just an interesting question for me to ask myself, because most of the people that I work with are generally around the same level. But then I realized that my most successful clients and most successful people that I've worked with, and even people, here's the funny thing, people that I haven't worked with, but that I've just given advice to in passing, or friends. I have friends who don't necessarily hire me, but they're like, oh my goodness, teach me how to do this. Teach me how to be successful in this way, or how to get my finances together, or how to get my business together. And I'm generous. If we go out to dinner or whatever, I'm chatting with people. I'm letting people know, like, girl, this is what you need to be doing, etc. And even among my friend group, I have one friend in particular that I'm thinking about who has really taken things to the next level. And I think we went to dinner a few months ago, and she was like, I just have to thank you for something that I didn't even realize that I had shared with her, but she was like, it has just made like all the difference, and my earnings have gone up, and it's just been great. And so I'm like, man, again, why is it, whether you're a friend or a client or whatever, like, what is it about the people who just really like kill the game versus people who don't? And so I realized that it's definitely a mindset issue. It's not a starting place issue. And I've noticed that people who are really, really successful, at least when it comes to financial success and business success and getting their business off the ground and creating streams of income and all of that, they're successful because they don't have a scarcity mindset. And it was like, oh my goodness, that's it. Like, that's the only thing that I can think of. That's the difference. Now, I recognize that some people might not know what that is. Maybe they've heard it in different contexts. I didn't really know what a scarcity mindset was. And when people started saying it, at first I was skeptical. I was like, what does that mean? Because some people, they say scarcity mindset strictly from the standpoint of like, oh, you just scared to spend money. And there are some, gurus or people who are, shiesty or whatever, and they just throw that term around to just basically try to get you to buy their stuff. So it's like, oh girl, you got a scarcity mindset. That's why you don't want to sign up for my program or you don't want to buy my thing. And it's like, what? Like, I don't have a scarcity mindset. Your program is just garbage. I just don't want to sign up for it. So that's not what I'm talking about, even though that is a part of it. But I feel like I harp enough in terms of the value of investing of yourself. And so you do have to have an understanding that it's important to invest in yourself. I feel like most Think and Grow chicks get that by now. Maybe the general public, doesn't know what that is, but people get it. Like, okay, if I want something, I got to put something in, I need to invest in myself. So I won't harp on that. But granted, remember, okay, I'm talking about my super, super successful, top-notch like clients. So that means everybody's invested in themselves. So it's not a matter of, are they willing to invest in themselves when others are not able to, because everybody did. But what is the key difference that really catapulted them? And so what I mean when I say they don't have a scarcity mindset is they understand that investing in yourself and an investing mindset is that it's a mindset, it's an attitude, it's not a one-time event. So investing in yourself is not a one-time event. It's a long-term attitude. And so I was thinking about the best way to demonstrate this. And so I'll give an example from my mom, because growing up, my mom was like the baddest financial manager that I knew, and she was just really legit. She always was the one in our family that managed money really well, and everybody came to her for advice. Even my own friends to this day, like my friends who are grown and have their own families, they're like, ask your mom, like, what did your mom think about this? I'm like, seriously, guys? Like, my mom doesn't know everything. Just kidding. She's really good at money. And one thing I remember growing up, it was funny, me and my brother used to make fun of my mom because to do odd jobs around our house, she would always pay somebody to do it for stuff that we thought that was ridiculous. Like, she didn't want my stepdad mowing the lawn. Like, she paid to get a landscaper to come out there and they cut the grass or whatever every 2 weeks or whatever. So we're like, okay, we'll let that ride. But then it was always paying for somebody to, paint the inside of the house. She never wanted us to do like a fun family project where, oh, mom, come on, let's paint the living room or whatever. She's like, no, I'm getting a professional to do this. And we're like, okay. She would have professionals come out and do window cleanings like outside once a year or twice a year or whatever to get top windows at the top of the house that we couldn't reach or whatever, and get professional cleaning. And she was always like paying people, hiring professionals to take care of little odds and ends around the house. So handyman stuff, fixing things, building things, touch up paint, drywall, just whatever had to do with the house. Like, for as long as we lived there, she was always hiring people. And so me and my brother, we would joke like, oh, you just like servants or something like that, because you're always hiring somebody. Like, every time you think to yourself like, oh, I need to get this done. Like, she was never a DIYer. She was always just getting it done. And so we just used to joke, and we thought that my mom was like being a prima donna. Like, why are you hiring somebody to do all this stuff all the time? Like, you always need a professional, mom. Does that make sense? But around, I think after my first year of college, my parents wanted to sell their house, and I grew up in the Metro Detroit area and Michigan. And so right around this time, the economy was like completely crumbling. And you guys know the housing crisis, it was just really bad. But not only was it bad all around the world, it was bad particularly in Detroit. Like, Detroit, I think maybe Gary, Indiana, Cleveland, like a few other cities got hit probably the hardest outside of everywhere else in the country. And so my family's neighborhood was no different. Michigan was no different. Like, people couldn't give their houses away. It was just ridiculous. And it was really sad because, a lot of our my parents' friends' families, many of them went through foreclosures, or they had to do short sales, or they had to sell their house for like way less than what they bought it for. And it was just like a really scary time. And I remember my parents being kind of nervous, like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Like, did we pick the wrong time to sell? They were building a new house elsewhere, so it was kind of like, we need to sell this thing. This is not something that we can just sit on. And while it took longer to sell, I kid you not, our house on the block was, I think, probably one of the only ones that sold for right about what my parents bought for it. So think about this. Now, that's not like a win in the sense of what you want. Obviously, if you buy a house and you live in it for 10 years, you would hope that it would appreciate. But given the nature of the economy, and it was just kind of this like random bubble that we were in and everything that was going on, and everybody else's houses were like, I mean, they were losing like $50,000 on it, craziness. It was amazing that my parents' house sold for what they bought it for. They didn't have to go negative. They didn't have to go underwater. they walked away, were able to sell the house, and, everything was gravy. And my mom was like, oh my goodness, like, this was crazy. So I remember when I heard the news, and, I was getting nervous in school, and so when I heard the news, I was like, wow, that's fantastic. And I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense, Mom. What do you think the case is? And she laughed, and she was like, all those years, you and your brother used to laugh at me about hiring a professional to do this and to do that. She's like, what you don't realize is, to a lay person, if I paint the walls and I know I'm not a professional painter, I'm not even like really crafty or handy or good at painting, or I try to touch up the drywall, or I try to do this, or I try to do that, to your untrained eye, it might not seem like a big deal, but because you're not a professional, you miss those subtleties. And she's like, over time, over the years, if I just would have, done everything myself, patched this, if I would have been scared to spend money, over time, the house would have looked sloppy, and it would have been something where it's like you can't quite put your finger on it. You can't quite figure out, something doesn't look right, or the room doesn't look right, or something's shifted or just not correct, or something's grimy. But she's like, because I made sure that I always hired professionals, because they are professionals, they can see things that I can't see as a lay person. Our house on the block, even though everybody's houses were, we live in a nice like suburban neighborhood, so it wasn't like there was like a crack house down the street or anything like that. Like, people had nice houses, but everybody was in this mindset of like penny pinching, the economy is really bad. They were scared to maintain their house. My mom was not like that. She was like, I don't care how much money it costs. This is my asset. This is my investment. I am going to keep putting money in this no matter what it takes, because I understand the value of the house. And so when it came time to sell, our house was the only one on the block that went for at least what my parents bought it for. And on top of that, it was crazy. The people who bought it, they like were asking my mom, like, can we buy your furniture? We love that, in the living room, or how that looks, because she did a really great job of maintaining it and making the house look great. And so this is not necessarily a story about my mom and her propensity to maintain houses well, or her hiring professionals, but it's about that mindset. That's what it means not to have a scarcity mindset. There are some people who understand the concept, I need to invest in myself, but they do it from a standpoint of, oh, I'm only going to invest in myself to get something back, and then they're done. And that's from a standpoint of finances and time and energy. And so honestly, people that I've worked with who have just like gone to the next level and it's been insane, they weren't scared to continue to maintain that investment. It wasn't this thing of like, okay, I'm just going to hire you. I'm going to scrape up the money to hire you, but then I'm not going to buy any of the things that you recommend. I'm not going to buy any of the tools that you recommend. I'm not going to, if I'm not a graphic designer, I'm not going to hire a graphic designer to get this done. Like, I see a lot of people who want financial success, who want business success, and they will kind of like psych themselves up to get to a place where they're like, all right, I'll spend money on something, to get me started. But then they like drop that, and then they kind of curl back up and they're like, okay, I'm done. Where is, the amazing success? And it's like, well, ma'am, like, one, are you continuously putting in effort and energy in it? Are you continuously doing that? And two, are you willing to maintain your investment? Because here's the thing. You have to understand that the value of what you invest in is not just for the result, but there's value in that asset in and of itself. If you are truly building an asset. My mom wasn't just like, oh, we just gonna buy this house so that in the hopes, in 10 years we could sell it and make money on it. She understood that our house was valuable in and of itself. And so because it had value, it was worthy to be maintained. And so there are many people who are signing up for programs or trying to get information, not because they value what the information is and what it can actually teach them. And education is value in and of itself. If you learn something from someone, or you receive mentorship from someone, and you know that, no one else can take that away from you. That is something that you always will have. And so that in and of itself is valuable. But there are people who are missing the value of the things that they are quote unquote investing in, and then they're like waiting for the return, and they're not doing what it takes to maintain that investment because they don't understand the value of what it is. And that is a scarcity mindset. That is you saying, all right, you've convinced me, I'm going to put this money in, okay? And then you're done, and you're like, I'm scared that there's never going to be any money, where that came from. I'm scared. Honestly, a scarcity mindset is not just scarcity around you having money, but honestly, at the end of the day, it's scarcity around your ability to generate that income back. So the biggest shifts that happened for me was when I got to a place where I was no longer afraid of money. And there are a lot of people who are afraid of money. We're afraid of not having enough of it. We're afraid of what's going to happen if, we lose our job or things, whatever. And we give money so much, we just make it way bigger than what it has to be in our minds. And so I find it interesting. This is a side note. A really great book that you should read about money is called The Secrets of Six-Figure Women. We read it as a part of a book club that I was doing, I think like last year or a year or two ago or something. It was really excellent. And in the book, it's written by Barbara Stanny. She interviews women who have a propensity to earn six figures or more, meaning no matter what kind of job they get, even if they get fired, if they get a new job, they're always just top earners. And then women who, no matter what kind of education they have, so women who have PhDs, women who have master's degrees, and Gabrielle, the name of that book again is The Secrets of Six-Figure Women. There are these highly, highly educated women who have a propensity to what Barbara Stanny, the author, calls under-earn, meaning no matter how much money they have, no matter how much education they have this propensity to under-earn, and they can't figure out why. And she used to be one of those chronic under-earners. And so she goes on this quest to kind of study six-figure women and then women who can't get it together financially and kind of figure out what the difference is. And it was so interesting. The women who were chronic under-earners, they did not ask for more money when it came to negotiations, like in job interviews and different things. They didn't want to do anything to invest in their ability to get more money because they were like, oh, I'm not one of those people that cares about money. Like, I'm not greedy like, those wealthy people or those rich people. I just want to focus on, what I love to do. I just want to focus on, my work, whatever. I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to go to seminars. I'm not going to learn how to network. I'm not even going to learn how to negotiate. I'm not going to invest in myself in any way. I'll get more education because that's the one thing in our society that we've been taught is supposed to give you more money, is if you keep getting degrees, you're supposed to somehow be worth more, even though I think we all know that that's not necessarily the case. So they weren't afraid to keep going back to school and incidentally getting into debt to go back to school. But anything other than that, they were like, I'm not going to enrich myself. I'm not going to go to seminars. I'm not going to go to conferences. I'm not going to focus on anything that has to do with money because I don't want to be one of those greedy rich people. I'm done with it. And so she was like, okay. And this was a reoccurring theme that she noticed that women in this book had. But then she interviewed women who, again, were chronic six-figure earners, meaning no matter what their situation was or what their job was, they were able to, command a good income for themselves and negotiate. And she asked them what their mindset was. And it was so fascinating. These women said, I don't want to be greedy. I don't want to focus on money. So I do what it takes to make sure that I can command the top dollar no matter what room I'm in. Isn't that fascinating? The six-figure women's reason for investing in themselves, for learning negotiation skills, for demanding, that they have a higher salary at the negotiation table when they're first getting into a job is because they were like, I don't want to be one of those people that has to worry about money. I don't want to be one of those people who's always worried about it, who's always obsessed with it, who's always wondering if I have enough. So to protect myself from becoming obsessed with money from a standpoint of poverty, I'm going to do what is necessary to invest in myself so that I don't have to worry about that down the road. And that is the thing. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to having a scarcity mindset versus not having a scarcity mindset. The willingness to put money out, understanding that it's going to come back to you. Now, granted, there are people who are not even at this conversation who wouldn't even invest in themselves, and so I'm not talking about them. But I just want to alert you to that because I think in personal development, there's this conversation about you have to invest in yourself, whether you are a business person or not, whether you're just in personal development, you need to go to conferences, you need to work with mentors and coaches, you need to obviously invest in your business if you are a business person. People get that, but then they stop at that level. They're like, all right, I'll buy this course. All right, I'll go to this conference. All right, I'll hire this mentor. And then that's it. And that's like putting a seed in the ground and just walking away from it and being like, all right, nature will do the rest, right? And then I'll have my huge harvest. And it's like, no, you have to be at a place where you are willing to continue to pour water, continue to nurture it, continue to make sure, till the ground and make sure it is what it is so that your harvest can eventually come. So again, investing in yourself or having an abundance mindset is not a one-time event. It's something that you have to have a long-term attitude about. And so once I got over that, things just like were really amazing for me. And another book that I recommend that I actually have here that you guys know I talk about this book all the time. It's really little, so you can see how thin it is. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. This, hands down, I think is the best book on personal finances and really a money mindset, period. This book is everything. It was written, I want to say like in the 1930s or something, maybe right around the Great Depression or, well, oh, yeah, this book was first published in 1926. Crazy, right? Written by George S. Clason. I think that's how you say his last name. And it's really cool, it's thin, and it's written in the style of a parable. And so this whole idea, The Richest Man in Babylon, is like this fictional story, but when I say fictional, there's all kinds of, money lessons in it and money things that you have to keep in mind. But it's written as if there is the richest man in Babylon, right? So they are in the Middle East, and there's all these Middle Eastern men that come, and they come to this place, I guess, where Middle Eastern men hang out. I forget what he calls it. And the richest man in Babylon is sitting there, and everyone around him who comes from all the nations all over, they're sitting at his feet, and they are listening to him to try to figure out, what can we do to make sure that we are financially successful. And so he has 7 lessons that he gives these men when they come to him every single day. And it's really good. But one of them, when I was reading it, that really changed my mindset was when he talks about, and it's the third cure, making thy gold multiply. And so we all have this understanding that we need to control our expenditures, meaning things that we are spending money on. And we're going to talk about expenses versus savings versus investment in a little bit. So we understand that our spending, we need to be mindful of, right? So he talks about that, like making sure that you are not feeding every wish and whim that you have, and that you're not, bleeding yourself dry financially because you just have to have, the new Jordans or something like that, and you're running out there and buying them. And so then he talks about saving a portion of everything that you earn. And that was huge for me in college when I got my finances together. That was the biggest financial mindset shift that I had to make, because I was in a lot of credit card debt. I was like, I owed the school money, and I was like working at all these like little jobs to just try to scrape up money. And I had to get to the mindset that I had enough to save 10%. And so that was the first thing. Because a lot of people, they're like, I would save money, but I don't make enough money. And I refused to even accept that, because I was living in Washington, D.C., which was and still is one of the most expensive cities in the country. I was paying an exorbitant amount of rent at the time, living off campus. I was an intern. It was a paid internship, but it wasn't a lot. Like I was making, maybe $11. I was thinking I was making like $12 an hour, $13 an hour. But I was a hostess at a French restaurant downtown, and I also was a side hustler. Like I sold stuff on eBay. I would buy used clothes from Goodwill, and I would take the bus out there and I would sell it on eBay and Etsy. So like all these little things I was hustling together. I still, once I understood that, was able to save 10%, even when I had debt, even when I was paying off credit card debt. I was never late on my rent. I never missed a credit card payment. And, all this too is by the grace of God. But I also was able to save 10% once I changed my mindset that it was something that was possible for me to do. So I stopped telling myself that it was impossible because of my station in life, and I just started making it happen. So I would waitress, hostess, whatever. I would come home in my apron and I would have cash, and I would literally dump the cash out on my bed, and I would count it out. And I would count out what 10% of that cash was, and I would put the 90% in one envelope, and I would put the 10% in another envelope. And when I went to the bank, I gave them the big envelope, put this in my checking account, and the little envelope, I was like, put this in my savings account. So anyway, you can save, and that's, I think, the second, the first or second cure that he talks about, which is like you need to basically save your coin. Actually it's the first one. So the first one is start thy purse to fattening. And that's where he talks about save, 1 coin out of 10. So again, this book is written in like old Arabian language, or it's, that's how it's fictionalized as such. So the first cure he talks about, you start your purse to fattening by saving 1 of the coins out of the 10. But then he talks about in the second cure, controlling thy expenditures, which is, not having unnecessary expenses. But then the third cure make thy gold multiply, which I feel like I read this book and I got on the savings bandwagon, but then I read it again a year or two later, and it was this one here, this third cure here, that really changed my mindset and really speaks to what I'm talking about today in terms of not having a scarcity mindset and really understanding how it can affect your finances if you do. And it's this idea that after you've saved, a portion of your expenses also needs to go to investments. This is so huge, and people do not teach this. I wasn't necessarily taught this, and again, as great as my mom was with finances, this is something that I'm teaching her now, and something that I will teach my kids. This was not taught. We are taught, don't overspend, great. We're taught, save at least 10%, great, and then that's just it. We're just supposed to be done. And it's like, no, if you want to have financial independence, if you want to secure wealth for you and your family, you also need to take that savings or part of what you're savings and you need to make it multiply. And how do you do that? You do that through investments. And so he talks about if one coin is going to savings, then another coin needs to go into needs to go into vehicles that are going to make your gold or is going to make your money work and multiply for you. And so let me find where he talks about what you should do. Okay, so in the chapter called Meet the Goddess of Luck, there's a man that tells his son a story about how he basically had an opportunity that would have fared really well for him. Maybe a herdsman was selling his sheep or something like that for a really low price and he couldn't afford to buy it, basically because he didn't have any money set aside for profitable investments. And so this man is telling his son, basically, if you don't want to be like me and you want to be successful, you need to get in the habit of saving a portion of what you earn, directing it towards things that you can put towards investments. And so he says, then do as I advise, do what I should have done at thy age. From thy earnings, keep out 1/10 to put into favorable investments. With this 1/10 of thy earnings, and what it will also earn, thou canst, before thou art my age, accumulate for thyself a valuable estate. And so he was telling his son, don't wait until you're 50, 60, 70, and then be like, oh, snap, I should have been making investments. Get into the habit now of taking 1/10 of all your earnings and putting that towards favorable investments. And so this goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning in terms of understanding that investing in yourself is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing thing. You have to retrain your mind to not see investments as expenses. Investments are different than expenses because when you put your money out, the point is at some point it is supposed to return back to you. Now, that might not be instant, it might not be tomorrow, it might not even be next year. I mean, hopefully most of us put money into our 401ks and we totally expect that we're not even going to touch that until we're 65 or 72 or whatever the age is. But I'm saying, how much more then should we do various investments for our business or different things that we want, and then understand that there is a time period that return is going to come back to us. But just because it doesn't return to you next week or it doesn't return to you next month doesn't mean that you should not continue investing in it. And I see people miss the mark on this when it comes to investing in their businesses. Isn't it weird that we get it when it comes to our 401k when we're talking about, having a 5% return annually or something, and we get super excited about that, but something like a business, which over time can have like 100% return or might replace your salary or something, you spend $300 on a course or something, and if you don't learn how to make $1 million next week, then you're like, I'm done. I'm done with my business. I'm not putting any more money into it. And it's like, first of all, your mindset has to be one that each month you are always allocating some amount of your money to some investment or something that you feel is going to give a return to you over time, and that you don't stop because it didn't happen in one season. You keep doing it until you eventually get what you're looking for. That's the mindset that you have to have. Another thing that I think is very interesting is you have to understand how money works. And so I'm super passionate about this because many of you might remember I worked in finance before I quit my job. Particularly, I worked in government finance, like banking insurance. And so I was very privy to economics and, treasury rates and Federal Reserve and how how from a global standpoint money works. And you can see it or hear it in the language that is used about money, but isn't it interesting that we don't apply that to our own financial practices? So what is money called? Currency. When we read the newspaper or the Wall Street Journal and they're talking about money that is in circulation, they're talking about things like circulating, right? And so what I thought was really interesting when I was working in banking and we were going into banks, really successful businesses, really successful banks, really successful investors, they always had a practice of putting money out and waiting for it to return back to them. They were participating in circulation, currency. Money is supposed to go out and to come back in. But for most of us, think about our financial picture. Money comes in from one entity, meaning our job or our 9 to 5 or whatever, and then it goes out to a series of other entities. So AT&T, Comcast, Safeway, Netflix, Zara, whatever else. And that money never comes back. And so what do we have to do in order to maintain the circulation? Because money is currency. And so it always needs to circulate in order for us to be able to maintain our lifestyle. What do? We go back to the 9 to 5 and we're like, I got to trade more dollars, or I got to trade more hours for dollars because I need dollars to continue this current that I got going on in my lifestyle in order to be able to feed financially these other things. So I go back to work, I give them more hours for dollars, I get my dollars back, and then I'm like, sweet, I can pay AT&T this month, I can pay Comcast this month, I can go shopping at Zara this month, I can pay Hollywood Nails to get my manicure. That money goes out, it does not come back. And so the cycle continues. So all money is a cycle. All money is circular, but we got it backwards. The average middle class American, the average 9 to 5er has it backwards. The money that's going out is not coming back. Wealthy people, business owners, people who are financially independent, a lot of the money that they send out always comes back to them. And it doesn't only just come back to them, it comes back to them with more money. And they use that extra to fund those lifestyle expenses, Zara, Ruth Chris, AT&T, whatever. But the bulk of that, they're sending it back out to other investments that are going to come back to them. And so I'm like, why is it that we get so stressed out at the idea of having to spend, I don't know, $200 a month or $100 a month or whatever, course, coaching, conferences, to fly somewhere? People like, girl, I can't go to that. Like, I gotta fly and get my hotel, and these are things that we should be doing on a regular basis. Yet think about, if you totaled up how much money you've actually spent on things that have not returned back to you. I was thinking about this just strictly with cable, right? So I actually didn't have cable before I got married, but my husband, he loves sports, he loves ESPN, and the only way that you can get it as it stands right now is if you have a cable package. And so we do have really fast internet because I actually need it for my business. So take this with a grain of salt. Part of it can be you could think of it as a business expense, but our total AT&T bill, because we have UVerse and cable and internet and all this stuff, we spend about $200, maybe even $225 or $250 some months. And so I was just thinking about just $200 a month, times 12 months, times just the 3 years that we've been married, and that I can say for sure, we've had cable. That's well over $7,000 that we've spent to AT&T, and that does not include what we spent on cell phone. I'm talking about just about cable and internet. $7,000 to AT&T, $7,000, to AT&T, that is not coming back to us. That's an expense, right? But I think about really big investments that I've made that were super scary. I've been involved in 2 masterminds now. I've worked with 3 different coaches now. All of these investments at the time were thousands of dollars and it was painful. It was like, oh my goodness, I have to come up with this money, not including the ongoing expenses to maintain my website. So website hosting or email marketing, right? So the emails that you guys get from me is not free for me to send them emails. It costs me almost $250 a month just to be able to store all of you all's email addresses and then send my newsletters out on a monthly basis. So my VAs, who are helping me with back-end stuff and customer service and graphic design, all of that are expenses, right? But I think about those investments that I've made, all of that money has come back to me and then some, all of it. All of the money that I've spent, so that's why I use spent and investing differently, all the money that I have invested and that I continue to invest, all of that comes back to me every single month. And it became such a strong revenue stream that I stand before you. What is it? Central Time. It's almost 2:00 in the afternoon. I'm not at work. I'm in my home office. This is my work. It became such a strong revenue stream that I was able to step away from the 9-to-5 situation and relying on my 9-to-5 to fund my expenditures. And now this is my circulation. This is how money circulates for me. And so I'm able to pay for some of those expenses and then some and put money back into things. And so I love it because now I'm already thinking about other things that I can do. I have a new mentor that I'm working with. I'm investing in going after corporate contracts, so big dollars in terms of developing curriculum for their women or their millennial women. In real estate investment, how can I start getting single family homes and duplex properties where I could start renting out in different cities? And so I'm learning all of this stuff, but I'm now at a place where I can get into the game and I have capital to be able to invest in those things because of how I shifted my money mindset 5 years ago when I was coming out of college and made different decisions with my money. So the moral of the story is I need us as a people, and you know what I mean when I say this, in terms of us as a people, I need us to get our finances to a place where mentally we're okay with sending money out. Think of it as a sparrow. Like in the olden days, they would take a bird and they would put a little message on it and they would send it out and the message would go where it was supposed to come and then it would come back to them, in a few weeks. We need to start seeing our dollars like that. And we need to carve out a portion of our money in our budget. So it's not a one-time thing. It needs to be a line item that we are investing. So how our finances look, 10% off the top, we tithe. We believe in that. We could have another live stream about the power of that, but we tithe. Another 10% minimum, we save. But another 10% goes to investments. And in the beginning, before I even had a business and before I even knew what my business was, what kind of investment I should be even getting into, that line item, I was still spending that money, but I was spending it on education. I was spending it on figuring out what the investment should be for me. So if you don't know what you should invest in, if you don't know what kind of business you should start, still put yourself in a habit of taking a line item. The goal is at least 10%, but do what you can in the beginning. But I'm a believer, if you could spend $200 on cable every single month faithfully, you can dedicate at least that to learning, what your investment should be. And I did that in the beginning. When I was working a job, I would just spend money just on courses and stuff just to learn what do I do with this blogging? What do I do with internet business? How does this even work? How can I turn this into a business? How do people make money on this? I spent money just learning that information. And so, after several months of learning that information, then it was oh, okay, I got the structure. I think this is something I can do. Then I started investing in my actual business because I had one. But before I had one, I had to figure out what I should be getting into. And that cost money too, in order to get expert advice or not even expert advice, just to buy books off Amazon, or to join programs or different things to learn. So anyway, that's what it means to have a scarcity mindset. It doesn't just mean an unwillingness to invest in yourself, but it means not understanding that investing in yourself is a long-term attitude. It's not a one-time event. And so as a people, I want us to get into this mindset where this is not only acceptable, but it's fashionable. It's something that we encourage our kids to do. So I think about other cultures and certain things that they have made fashionable almost to a fault. So certain cultures are oh, you are not only going to graduate school, but you are going to be a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, or you're not allowed to come home, basically, right? I mean, there are some cultures where the kids are Mom, but I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, and they got to kind of tamper down on that. But I'm just saying it's so ingrained in their culture that people understand that that's the expectation. I want us to get to a place where we understand that the expectation is a portion of your income shall go to investments and investments in yourself. So obviously, we talk about stocks and different things like that, but I want us to think broader about what an investment is. Your own business, your own education, your own enrichment. If you are not an entrepreneur and you don't want to be one, more power to you. We need people who work jobs. So I'm not saying everybody should be an entrepreneur, but like those six-figure women in that book, Secrets of Six-Figure Women, you should be investing in yourself in ways that will allow you to command higher and higher salaries at the corporations that you go to, so that you aren't one of those people that is just always pressed for cash and has to worry about money all the time. So anyway, that's all I had to share with you guys. I usually feel it like when I get hype and I get on my soapbox. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good one. Let me turn the camera on. Let me turn the microphone on because this is going to be a live stream or podcast. But yes, anyway, I'm very excited about some of the things that I have coming out for you guys. Make sure you stay tight. If you are on my email list, you better be opening those emails or you're going to be very upset when you find that you missed out. And if you're not on my email list yet, you can join at thinkandgrowchick.com/join. You'll be added to my free accountability group, which now has over 7,000 goal-getting women in it. And you'll be put on my newsletter list where you'll get updates and notifications about cool things that are happening around my community. So that's all I had for you all. I hope this was some cool afternoon inspiration, and I will talk to you all soon.